attraction to the blues?
Oh, it's just so much, it's deep. It's just deep, the sound of it, you know. It's more, you can, I think the feeling of, somebody's feelings are expressed most powerfully with blues music than with other kinds of music, you know. Like jazz, you know, there's all kinds of music, and jazz has its thing, but jazz is like more cerebral, you know, it's more mental, it's more, you know, it has blues in it, of course, it's based in blues, but it's still, blues is more like meat and potatoes. Blues is more basic, it's more raw emotion, it's more, it's whatever you're feeling at the moment is what'll come out in the music, you know.
What was the thing that attracted you most?
That power, from what I was just talking about, the power of the emotion comes through in the notes and in the sound of the guitar itself, or any instrument you play, saxophone, guitar, piano, whatever it is you play. You know, you just put everything that you are at that moment into that, and it comes out of the instrument that you're playing, and that's a powerful, attractive sound, and most people respond immediately to it because you can't deny it. It's so in your face, you know, and it doesn't rely on sound effects or enhancements to the sound so much, because you can take a beat up old acoustic guitar that you're not plugged into any amplifier or any sound effects or anything else, and you bend that note and you bend it and you give it a vibrato, you put your feeling into it, and that comes across without any help from fuzz or wah-wah or any kind of, you know, technical stuff.
Natural.
It's natural, it's basic. And that's what I like about blues, you know, and that's what I think a lot of people respond to with blues, you know.
How did it start? I mean, go back and like think of what was the revelation that said, damn, you know.
That's what I want to play?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I played music since I was a kid, and all kinds of music, and I listened to all kinds of music too growing up, and you know, I've heard every style of music since I was a kid, and but then when I became an adult, and I went through a lot of, you know, weird relationships and weird changes, and you know, I made a lot of stupid decisions, you know, bad choices, and went through some pretty awful experiences after high school, and for about 10 years or so after high school, I was kind of not really my true self yet, you know. I was still developing. I don't think you really become an adult until you're in your 30s or late 30s, you know. I think you're still really kind of a child in a lot of ways in your 20s, you know. And I was living in Florida, and you know, in a bad relationship, and it finally ended after 6 long years of really horrible things that we don't need to go into here necessarily. But I came back to California and decided to start, you know, checking out the music scene seriously.
What year was that when you came back to California?
About 83. So I started hanging out in the clubs, and
but you've been playing guitar before.
I have been playing guitar since I was 11. My parents bought me a guitar and took me in to get some lessons, and so I took some lessons, basic stuff, you know, for a couple of years at a little shop that wasn't too far away, and you know, so because I was singing since I was 5 years old, since I could talk pretty much, and so they'd always, you know, prop me out there in front of the family, and you know, whenever get-togethers would happen, oh, let her sing, okay, you know, so I go out there, and you know, I'm a little teapot, and Tiptoe Through the Tulips and those goofy little tunes, when little kids sing, Twinkle Little Star, and. But
so you were a showpiece.
Pretty much from the get-go, and so I learned that right from the get-go. That's once you start doing that, you kind of go, oh, I know how to make people like me, or I know how to make people happy. Sing a song for them and they get happy. When you're a little kid, that's the way you're thinking. You're not really analyzing it too much deeper than that. You just kind of like a dog, it's like training.
Automatic.
Yeah. So I always did that, and all through elementary school I went into talent shows, and I usually did pretty good in talent shows, but I didn't have anything to accompany myself with, and I would usually have to get somebody to play piano for me or something, at these talent shows. So when I was 11, my folks thought, well, let's get her a guitar, So that's how that started. And so, I started playing guitar. I picked it up pretty quick, and, within a few years I was able to do finger picking and chords and, playing all this different stuff. And then I stopped taking lessons and pretty much just started really learning by ear, because I have a pretty good ear for picking up things, and I didn't have the patience for reading. I did learn how to read music, when I was younger, and but then I got impatient with that, and so now I've forgotten a lot of it. I have to say, I can still pick them out when I look at it, but I'm not what you'd call a sight reader. Like a lot of people I know, they can just look at a sheet of music and read it like that. But no, it takes me a little while now. I have to go. No, but for me, it's a lot faster. Just do it by ear. So anyway, I'm backtracking, but I did talent shows all through high school. I did any kind of performances that would come up.
Doing blues?
Oh no, I didn't really get into blues until I got back from
Florida.
When I was an adult. Blues is adult music. I know a lot of young people, or a fair number of young people are aware of it and are trying to play it and everything like that. But I didn't really get into it heavy. I didn't decide to focus on that kind of music until I was ready, And for me, it was about, you have to understand things about life before you can really put what you have to put into playing blues. Because, so like I said before, whatever you're feeling at the moment is going to come out in your music, It's going to come out in blues or rhythm and blues, soul music, which is all related anyway. And if you're not in touch with your feelings, there's no way to translate that into the music that you're playing. And you can't really be in touch with your feelings if you're still a child, because you don't know what you're feeling. You can't articulate it. You can't put words in.
You can't define it.
You can't define it internally, to yourself. And it's not like defining it like mentally or like an analyst would or something like that, but it's something that you just know inside. It's an inner knowing kind of thing. It's more spiritual and emotional than it is intellectual, But people develop at different stages in different. People develop at different. People develop at different rates. Some people mature pretty early. Some people take a while. It took me a while. And when I got into blues, I started hanging out in the clubs, and I met this guy who I'm still playing with today. His name is Nate Shiner. That was what he was going by at the time, and also known as Snake Boy. And he had been playing blues for 20 years when I met him. He just strictly into blues. And as soon as I heard him play, and he puts a lot of himself into it. He'd been playing it for 20 years, so he knew what to do. So as soon as I heard it, I went, that's what I want to do. Because it spoke to me, you know. Because blues will reach out and grab you, and once it grabs you, that's it, you know. You know, I mean, I've heard all kinds of music, you know, and I still like all kinds of music, but that's what I wanted to do. It just grabbed me. It's like, this is how I can express myself the best. And to me, that's the beauty of that kind of music, is that it's a simple form of music, but yet it's so complex because it is so simple. And you can do so many things with it. It's like clay. You can mold it in any shape you want it to.
I guess the question I'm trying to figure out is one or two people that you feel really influenced you, like from guitar, singing.
Yeah.
You know, what was it that just made your soul come undone?
Well, I've had a lot of, I've had a few really heavy influences all through my life, not necessarily after I got strictly into blues. So before I got into blues, the singers that it really influenced me, the biggest one, it was Louis Armstrong, the biggest one, because I heard him from when I was a little kid, and he's so powerful. He was like light years ahead of everybody at the time that he came out, and the way he sings, he's like everything personified in one person, you know. His emotion, his ability to maneuver through a song, his timing, his phrasing. He's like the ultimate singer, you know. But going through high school, I listened to a lot of R&B and Gladys Knight. You know, I love great singers. You know, great singers have always influenced me, and so you know, it's hard to pinpoint one person or even two people that really I can say I'm influenced by in my singing. You know, to me, who you're influenced by doesn't necessarily mean who you sound like. Because when you first start out, a lot of times you try to imitate someone else.
Right.
You try to copy someone else that you like. But what you really want is to develop your own sound. You know, so that you're recognizable for you. And if somebody hears you and says, oh, you sound like such and such a person, well, that may not mean anything, because you may not have been influenced by that person at all. It's just the way you sound.
Right.
You know, so to me, influences are something that go deeper than that. They go down into you and they become part of you, and you use them to, you know, as you develop your own sound, elements of those people make their way into your vocabulary, you know.
Were there any guitar players that were influential? I mean, you know, one or two. You don't have to go. I mean, I know it's a hard question to ask because there's so much that influences all of us, but sometimes there's that first thing that just turns your head around on guitar and you go, whoa, I like that vibrato. How do you do that? You know,
right.
What was the thing that got you?
Well, I have to kind of go back into like high school. When I really started, you know, listening to, you know, getting really more into music on a little deeper level, and definitely Carlos Santana, big, you know, big impact on me. He's still, you know, really powerful. He's even more powerful than he was then, but I mean, that guitar that stands out more than anything from what I can remember from those days, you know. But at that time, I wasn't so guitar focused anyway. But later, I realized, you know, how much of an impact he did have on me. Later on, I listened to jazz for a while too, and I really got into Pat Metheny for a while. I really loved his guitar playing, and I listened to a lot of I had a bunch of his albums, and I just love Pat Metheny. He has a real sensitive and lyrical way of playing, you know. He's not a blues player, he's a jazz player. And then later on, I was turned on to Kenny Burrell, And Kenny Burrell is like a cross between blues and jazz. He's like ultimate cross between those two forms, you know. And then when I got into blues seriously, Snake Boy he really turned me on to a lot of different people that I hadn't heard before, and some of the people who really stand out as far as that goes are like Magic Sam. I really love Magic Sam from Chicago era, from the 60s, west side of Chicago. And Otis Rush and Buddy Guy, and then there's the whole Texas thing, because Snake Boy's from Texas, so he was really influenced by a lot of the Texas players too, and which include like T-Bone Walker and Freddie King, and you know. And then, of course, I listened to a lot of Albert King, B.B. King, all the Kings, Earl King, you know, there's lots of Kings. And then as far as singers, also, I mean, there's just so many great blues singers, you know, Big Mama Thornton and Coco Taylor and Jimmy Witherspoon, and I mean, you can go on and on, there's just tons. But influenced on me, you know, who I tried to imitate, first of all, I would say kind of like Magic Sam. I kind of really tried to, you know, learn riffs from some of his records and stuff like that, you know. And then, but see, I'd been playing guitar all along since I was 11 years old, so I already had kind of my own way of playing it. So when I got into blues, I was able to just sort of do it, kind of bring my own knowledge into it already, you know, but I still had learning to do. I still had a learning curve to get over and learn the scales and learn the methods and, you know, techniques of playing blues, you know, the heavy bending. And I started off not using a pick. That's how I started playing guitar. I never used a pick. I always finger picked. And then when I got into it, kept dropping the picks, you know. I couldn't keep them in my hand, you know, because I just kind of get carried away and then they'd go flying off, you know. So I'd be forced to go back to my old way of doing it with my fingers, and so I just decided, you know, who needs the pick? So that's how I play it, and I didn't even realize that a lot of the early blues players, that's how they played it, without a pick, you know. Albert Collins didn't, you know, a lot of the people who've since passed on, and even the ones who are still here, the old timers, you know, a lot of them don't use a pick. Some do, of course, but that's kind of that's just sort of I don't know if it's a tradition or not, but it's just a way a lot of them do it. But I didn't realize that. It's just the way I did it all the time, even when I was a kid. So it's real natural to me to not use a pick, you know, because I know where the strings are with my fingers, and that's how I play. It frees me up in a lot of ways.
I told you of another guitar player that I met, Joyce Coolin.
Right.
No pick.
Yeah.
When I asked her I was at their studio, you know, last year, and she said, "Here, play my guitar for a minute." And I said, "Oh, where's your pick?" She goes, "Don't have one."
Yeah.
So I had to use a quarter.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
But it worked, you know.
You could break a string with that, no? Pretty easy. Yeah. You know, I mean, she probably, I don't know, did she ever use a pick before?
Haven't interviewed her yet.
Yeah. Probably not, you know.
Well, you know, speaking of early times, tell me about where you grew up. You know, your mom and dad. Who were they? What kind of influence did they play on you, and what kind of support did they have for you? Yeah.
My mom and dad are like from two different worlds, and their paths crossed, and here I am, you know. My dad was from Alabama, little dinky little town in Alabama. You know, he was just a average, you know, southern white boy with a love of music. You know, he sang. He could sing really well. He hitchhiked his way west, and he hopped freight trains, and he ended up in California eventually, you know, where he met my mother, who hadn't been in the United States for very long. She was born and raised in near Cairo, Egypt, and
Egyptian.
Yeah, she's Egyptian Lebanese background, but born and raised in Egypt, and that's where her family was from too. And it's like East meets West, you know, totally. And
really.
So yeah, you could say I'm kind of a kind of African, Asian, European blend with supposedly a little bit of Cherokee, you know. In the
You're
background.
all mixed up.
Yeah, my dad always claimed to have some Cherokee background also. I don't know. You know, a lot of people claim that too. So both my parents were musical, but they never pursued a music career. And when I finally decided that that's what I wanted to do, they supported me. Occasionally came to some of my gigs, you know. And when I got back to California, in the mid '80s, when I came back and started getting into blues pretty heavy, it was only a few years later that my dad passed away, and so it was just my mother left after that, and so she would come see me play from time to time, you know, places, and she liked what I was doing, although she was still worried about me. She always worried. Of course, mothers worry all the time, you know.
It's their job.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. So music was encouraged.
Yeah, it was definitely encouraged, you know. I originally started out wanting to be a visual artist, a painter, because I also draw and paint, and, you know, I have a graphic art background, you know. I thought that's what I was going to be, because when I was a kid, that's what I would do. I would draw on everything. I used to draw on the refrigerator. I used to draw on the walls, you know, tabletops, you know, I would draw on everything. And then I got into painting, and I took a lot of art classes in school, and, you know, so music was always more of a secondary art form, you know, and then later it became what I really wanted to pursue. And because I found painting and, you know, that kind of art was too much of you're alone. I felt like I was always too alone doing that, and I'd rather be with other people, you know. I didn't want to be by myself all the time like that, because when you're a painter or that kind of an artist, you're alone a lot.
Not a lot of interaction.
No, and definitely there's no interaction with a crowd. And there, you know, any performing artist will tell you there's nothing like the interaction between you and the crowd. Going back to, you know, getting into blues and playing with Nate, you know, he really opened up this whole world of the blues world, which had always been kind of, well, in recent times, kind of shoved underground, you know, in the background. It's not played on commercial radio. It's not known to the general public very much. You know, in the 40s and 50s, it sort of had its own heyday, and it was the popular music at the time, you know. Well, swing was also popular, yeah. But swing was just blues that was orchestrated, you know, really. I mean, it's all blues based, but then it got shoved in the background when other music forms became popular, and it really wasn't played on the radio anymore. And in the 70s, it almost died with disco came along, and the 70s funk thing and everything, and blues players had a really hard time finding work.
The big guys, as I recall, growing up in the 60s, my exposure to blues was Muddy Water,
yeah.
Electric Mud was a very unique album, which was a departure from the strict rule of blues, and it went into more experimental. You know, the acid generation kicked in.
Well,
and then we had Albert King,
right.
B.B. King, which would frequently play on the same bill with Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, yeah.
So I went to go see Jimi Hendrix, and who was there? John Mayall.
Right.
And then we have Albert King, B.B. King,
yeah.
And I was amazed, you know, what I saw, which blew my mind, to see these guys dressed conservatively in suits, kicking ass.
Yeah.
You know, that...
Because that was their tradition. That's how they did it. They're from the old school. That's you dress up, you go on stage, you dress up. It's a show. I love that, because I fell into that, you know, real easy. You know, when I get on stage, I like to dress up, and, you know, to me, when you're putting a show on for the audience, they're paying to not only hear you, but they're paying to see you too, and they want to see. To me, we live in a visual world, and if you're blessed with the gift of sight, you know, which a lot of us take for granted, but if you're blessed with that, you know, you want to see a show as well as hear a show and experience the show. So, you know, I think the people who perform, they should dress in a way that's different than the crowd that's coming to see you. You know, give them a little extra, give them something else to take home with them, you know, besides the music. Willie Dixon, Muddy Waters, all those guys. Willie Dixon was really instrumental in bringing blues to Europe. They went over there before the 60s. They were there in the 50s. They were there, and the Europeans glommed onto blues like it was the best thing that they'd ever heard. And so they planted that seed over there. And then the young guys coming up, right, such as Clapton and the Rolling Stones, they heard that. That's what they wanted to play. And that's how the so-called British blues invasion started, because that's who they learned it from. So they had the opportunity to learn from the real masters, and then they did their own thing with it, and then they got really popular, whereas, you know, the American blues guys were still struggling. So it's kind of a shame, but they got really popular, and then they just brought it back over here in a recycled form.
Repackaged.
Yeah.
But what was great was to also see the way that, to see the young people on stage with the old guys, which was like classical training for me.
Yeah.
I'd say, oh, that's where, I knew it automatically as a teenager, that I know that's where it came from, because the respect for the old guys was absolutely there.
Yeah.
You know, you could see that the younger guys going, you know, without saying it, they visually acknowledged, and they said, and by the way, this is the guy, and you could hear the influence. Yeah. Especially Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah,
Jimi Hendrix and Albert King would jam together on stage. And
Jimi Hendrix played in a rhythm and blues band way before he became himself.
Right. Isley Brothers.
Yeah, exactly. He was a sideman for a lot of these groups.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he was billed. His name was Jimmy James at the time. You know, but yeah, I mean, it's really true, and he's an American born, and so he was really definitely, you know, comes from that whole tradition anyway. I mean, Hendrix was really rooted in blues, even more so than, you know, I mean, the English guys couldn't possibly have that background. They just couldn't. And that's the kind of irony about it, you know. They appreciate it more even though it doesn't come from there, but I guess people always take things for granted that's in their own backyard.
It's the international exchange program.
Yeah, right.